The launch settings are our way of telling a Phantom when and how often to launch when we're carrying out the tasks that we want to automate. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to run through the various options available to us when we want to tell the Phantom when to launch and how often to launch. Okay, so first things first, launch settings are very obviously all about timing. So one thing that we just want to double check before we start is our time zone that we have set in our workspace settings. So then we get into the more advanced options, we know that we're setting the Phantoms to run at the times that match our time zone. Okay, so to check our time zone, what we want to do is up in the top right hand corner of the screen, click on the drop down beside your name, scroll down to my workspace settings, and you'll see here at the very top of your information, you'll see the time zone next to your workspace name. So in this instance, my time zone is set to Europe Madrid, which is actually an hour ahead than my actual time zone, which is Dublin. So what's going to happen here is if I set my Phantom up to launch at 9 a.m., thinking that my workspace settings are set to Dublin time, it's actually not going to launch until 8 a.m. So there's going to be an hour difference there. So what we want to do is click on the drop down, and I'm going to go up and select Europe Dublin. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to save that. Okay, so now we know our time zone is correct, so we can get into the launch settings. So in your Phantom setup, scroll down and click on launch settings, and you're going to be presented with four options here. So the first option is a set of pre-programmed templated launch options that PhantomBuster has built into the Phantom. So at the moment, this is set for once per day. If we click on that menu, we're going to see a whole host of other options: twice per day, 3 times per day, once every other hour, once per hour, and up and up and up. We can have 3 times per working hour. We can have once per working hour, excluding weekends, including weekends. So you can use any of the preset options there. Now, one thing just to note when you're setting your frequency, make sure that when you're setting your frequency, you understand what your behavior settings are as well. So for example, this is a Sales Navigator search export. It's going to be set at 2,500 results per launch. 2,500 results per day is the recommended rate limit for a Sales Navigator search export. So if you're to try to run this twice per day, it's going to attempt to export 5,000 results, and that can run into session expiry and rate limit issues. So just make sure that you bear in mind what your behavior settings are and how many results you're asking the Phantom to launch when you're setting your frequency. Okay, so the next launch setting is pretty straightforward. It's just set to once, but we have two options here. Option A, we have launch manually. So you'd use this if you're just setting a Phantom up for the first time and you want to test it out. The second one is if you want to launch at a specific date and time. So if we click on launch at a specific time, what we can do is we can select the date and time. So click on this box here and you'll see a calendar come up and a range of times that come up that we can set our Phantom to launch. So this is really handy if you want to launch your Phantom potentially like a week from today, or pre-program it to launch at some date in the future. So once you have all of those options selected, you can just click save. Okay, so the next option is pretty straightforward as well. It's launching after another Phantom has finished. And this can be pretty handy when we're chaining Phantoms together in a customized flow. And how this works is we're going to select after another Phantom, and then we're going to use this drop down, the launch after drop down, to select which Phantom that we want this Phantom to run after. So what's going to happen is your Phantom that you've selected in here is going to run, and then it's going to send a trigger to this Phantom that you're setting up now to then run once it's complete. The one thing to understand, or just to keep an eye on when chaining Phantoms together and using the launch after another Phantom launch setting, is the rate limits. So if you're combining multiple LinkedIn or Sales Navigator Phantoms together, and you're passing the results file between each one, and you're having them launch after each one, make sure that you're spreading your rate limits or spreading the launches out to keep under the recommended rate limits for PhantomBuster and LinkedIn and Sales Navigator Phantoms. Okay, so the last option is the advanced option. This is where the time zone becomes particularly important, because what we can do here is right down to the minute, we can decide when exactly we want to launch the Phantom. So you'll see here all the checkboxes. You'll have minutes, hours, days, days of the week, and months. And one thing to note actually, if you are using the repeatedly options up here, and if we were to set it to once every other working hour between 9 to 5, if you go into the advanced here, you'll actually see the checkboxes will reflect that. But just make sure if you're using the advanced option that you've checked your time zones and they match up with the time zone that you're actually in, so that when you put these settings in place and you're using the advanced option, that they're running at the right times.